Jason Elijah Cole was 36 years old when he heard his wife's heels on the kitchen floor and understood, before she appeared in the doorway, that something had already ended. He just had not been told yet. He was standing at the counter making coffee, 2 scoops, a pinch of cinnamon, water at the right temperature. It was the kind of small routine a man holds on to when everything larger has started sliding. He poured 2 cups the way he always did, set hers where she always sat, waited. Deborah Cole walked in wearing the burgundy blazer she saved for days that required her to be in charge of something. Her bag was already on her shoulder. Her keys were already in her hand. She had not come down for coffee. She did not sit. "I spoke to an attorney yesterday," she said. "You will receive the paperwork by end of week." Jason kept both hands around his mug. The ceramic was warm, and he held on to that because everything else in the room had gone cold. "What paperwork?" he said. Not a question. He already knew. Deborah looked at him the way she had been looking at him for months. Not with anger, but with the settled expression of a woman who had made a decision and was now simply completing the administrative steps of it. "Divorce papers, Jason." She adjusted the strap on her bag. "I do not think this is a surprise." It was not. And that was the part that cut the deepest. He had been out of work for 14 months. That was the number that lived at the center of everything. 14 months since the engineering firm where he had spent 9 years was acquired by a larger company that did not need his department, and his entire team had been walked out on a Thursday afternoon with a severance letter and a firm handshake from a man none of them had ever met. 14 months of applications and interviews and second-round callbacks that faded into silence. 14 months of watching his wife's patience do what Deborah's patience always did when tested long enough: sharpen into something that could cut. He was not idle. He needed her to know that, though he understood as he stood there that she had stopped being interested in the distinction between idle and unlucky some months ago. "I have the Hargrove interview on Tuesday," he said. His voice was level. He had learned to keep it level. "And the conversation with Loretta Jacobs from the municipal office is still open," she said. "Jason." Her voice did not rise. It just stopped his. "It is not about the interviews." He looked at her. "It has not been about the interviews for a long time," she said. "I have been carrying this household for 14 months. The mortgage, the utilities, the car note, all of it." She paused, not for effect, but for accuracy, the way Deborah did everything. "I did not marry a man I was going to carry. That is not what I agreed to." There it was. Not dressed up, not softened into something easier to absorb. Just the plain, clean shape of what she had been thinking every time she looked at him for the past several months, finally said out loud. He set his mug down on the counter. "Is there someone else?" he asked. Something moved behind her eyes. Fast. Involuntary. She smoothed it away before it had fully formed, but he had seen it the way you see something at the edge of a headlight. Briefly, clearly, and then gone. "This is not about someone else," she said. He noticed she had not said no. She was gone 20 minutes later. He heard the front door pull shut behind her, deliberate and final the way she did everything. He heard her car back down the driveway, the engine turning onto the street, the sound thinning and then disappearing entirely. Jason stood in the kitchen for a long time. He looked at the room the way you look at something you are about to lose and cannot stop losing. The pots above the stove, hers, carried over from her apartment the week they moved in together. The Charles White print above the breakfast nook, his, save for across 3 months of lean paychecks. The coffee maker they had argued pleasantly about in a store on a Saturday morning 9 years ago, eventually choosing it together because neither of them could find a reason to leave. He picked up his mug. He drank the rest of it standing alone at the counter where he had poured 2 cups out of habit for the last time. Then he walked to the spare room, the one he had converted into an office after the layoff, the room with the whiteboards and the notebooks and the business plans spread across the corkboard in his own handwriting. And he sat down and opened his laptop. Not because he was not hurting, because stopping was the thing he refused to do. His mother arrived at 6:15 with a pot of oxtail and the particular expression she wore when she already knew something and was waiting to be told it. Cecilia Cole was 62 years old and had raised Jason alone after his father passed, and she had a way of walking into a room that made the room feel more stable. She set the pot on the stove without being asked. She hung up her coat. She sat down at the kitchen table and folded her hands and waited. She filed, Jason said from the doorway. "I know." Cecilia's voice was even. "Come sit with me." He sat. He told her the shape of it. The attorney, the paperwork, the way the conversation had ended. He told her about the accounts, because that was the part that still felt like a hand closing around his lungs. 3 weeks ago, he had gone to buy gas, and his card had declined. He had called the bank from the parking lot. Deborah had transferred the joint funds, $18,000, built over 9 years of both their incomes, to a personal account. The note she left on the counter said the accounts had been restructured for the legal separation process. 11 words. He had counted them standing at the counter reading the note the way he always read things he needed to understand correctly. Cecilia listened to all of it without interrupting. Her jaw tightened once when he got to the accounts. That was all she let herself show. The house? She asked when he finished. Her name is on the deed. Has been since the refinancing 2 years ago. My name came off during the credit review. The business loan had dropped my score, and the bank flagged it. He paused. I did not think anything of it at the time. She said it was administrative. Cecilia was quiet for a moment. Jason. Her voice was careful. When did the refinancing happen? He thought about it. About 8 months before she started pulling away, he said. The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet. The kind that means something has landed. I see, Cecilia said. She did not say anything else about it. She got up and served the food, and they ate together at the table where Jason had eaten breakfast alone that morning across from a chair that was already becoming someone's empty chair. The oxtail was perfect, which was what Cecilia's oxtail always was. You are not starting from the beginning, she said when they were nearly done. I need you to understand that. You are not starting over. You are starting from a place she has not seen yet. Jason looked at her. There is a significant difference between those two things, she said. Do not let the feeling of one convince you it is the other. He did not say anything. He refilled both their glasses and kept eating. But he was listening. He always listened to Cecilia the way he listened to the things that mattered, completely, from the inside out. Later, after she left, he sat at his desk and opened the notebook he had been filling for 8 months. The engineering consulting model. The gap he had identified in the market for mid-sized developers who were taking on structurally complex projects without proper technical support. The contacts he had quietly maintained. The methodology he had been refining in the early mornings before Deborah was awake, in the late evenings after she went to bed, in the careful, invisible hours of a man building something that no one in his own house believed in. He had not told her about it. Not anymore. The last time he had tried, for months ago over dinner, she had listened for 3 minutes, and then said, Jason, a plan is not a job. I need you to find a job. He opened a new document. He typed the name at the top. Cole Structural Solutions. Then he got to work. He did not know, sitting at that desk in the spare room of a house that was no longer in his name, that the woman who had just left would spend the next 2 years watching every door she walked through close quietly behind her. He did not know that the man she left for had already decided she was temporary. He did not know that in 24 months he would be sitting in a real office on the 9th floor of the Dearborn building when she walked through his door, resume in hand, 9 months of silence where her career used to be. He did not know any of that. He just kept working. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday in February. Gray sky, cold air, the kind of morning that does not apologize for itself. Jason arrived early. He sat on his side of the conference table and looked at the documents his attorney had arranged in front of him and did the thing he did when something was too large to hold whole. Broke it into its parts, identified each one clearly, found the edges of it. Deborah arrived 7 minutes later with her attorney, a precise woman named Patricia Wynn who laid papers on the table the way someone lays tiles, flat, certain, in an order that had been decided before anyone else walked in. Deborah wore a charcoal blazer Jason had not seen before. New. She had been acquiring new things for months. He had noticed without commenting, the way you notice a pattern before you can name it. Patricia Wynn did not waste time. The house. Deborah retained full ownership under the existing deed, which carried only her name since the refinancing. Jason's attorney had reviewed the transfer documentation and found no clear path to challenge it without a legal process that would cost more than the equity recovered. Jason had signed off. He was an engineer. He understood load-bearing decisions. The accounts, restructured during the separation process. After accounting for household debts Deborah had covered in the intervening months, Jason's share of the joint finances came to $4,215. His car, fully in his name. He kept it. What he packed from the house fit into 7 boxes and 2 duffel bags. His clothes, his books, his work files, 3 boxes of notebooks and hard drives and annotated reports from 9 years of an engineering career, the physical record of a professional life that was still intact even if nothing else felt that way. His father's cufflinks, which had been in a drawer in the bedroom since the funeral and which he had not thought about once in the past year and could not now leave behind. A framed photograph of him and Cecilia at his college graduation, which had lived in the spare room because Deborah had said the main rooms felt cluttered when there were personal photos in them. Patricia Wynne slid the final signature page across the table. Jason picked up the pen. He did not look at Deborah before he signed. Not because he was performing composure, because he had already said the things that needed saying in his own mind on the drive over, and what remained was simply the act. He signed. He stood. He buttoned his coat. "I hope you find what you are looking for," he said. He meant it entirely. He also knew, in the particular way that certain things become clear at endings, that she would not. Deborah looked at him for a moment. Something moved through her expression, not regret, not quite, but its quieter cousin. The involuntary acknowledgement of a door closing on something that cannot be retrieved. Then Patricia Wynne said something to her in a low voice, and Deborah looked away. Jason walked out. The night before the signing, Jason had sat at Cecilia's kitchen table with Raymond Robinson and a pot of coffee between them. The business plan notebooks spread across the surface alongside the remnants of a meal Raymond had brought over without being asked, which was how Raymond expressed every important thing. Raymond Robinson was the kind of friend who had driven a borrowed pickup truck to the house on the day Jason moved out, showing up at 8 in the morning without a call, already knowing what was needed. He was a large, unhurried man who had known Jason since they were 11 years old and expressed his sharpest feelings through practical, unannounced presence. He read through the notebooks for 40 minutes without speaking. When he finished, he looked up. "What do you need to launch?" $35,000, Jason said. "Liability insurance is the biggest entry cost. Software licensing. First and last on a small office space." "I have 22 in savings," Raymond said. "Raymond, I am not giving it to you." Raymond closed the notebook. "I am putting it in. There is a difference. You know the difference." Jason looked at his friend across the table. "Write me a shareholder structure," Raymond said. He picked up his coffee. "Tonight." The rest came from Cecilia. She arrived the next morning with a cashier's check drawn from an account Jason had not known existed. She had been building it for years. She pressed it into his hands at her kitchen table and said, "This is not charity. This is what I have been keeping for the moment you needed it. Every mother who knows her child knows a moment like this is coming." She said, "Now go build the thing." Cole Structural Solutions opened on the first Monday of March. 1 room above a print shop in the Dearborn building. Second-hand furniture because some costs could be deferred. New equipment because some could not. Jason spent the first morning setting up the way he set up everything, methodically, with the understanding that the physical order of a workspace tells you something about whether the person in it takes it seriously. He took it seriously. The first client arrived in week 3. A developer named Gerald Ames with a 7-story mixed-use project and a structural problem he had been getting conflicting answers on for 2 months. He had found Jason through a former colleague, which meant the 9 years of careful professional relationships Jason had maintained through the layoff and the long silence had started to return something. Gerald Ames described the problem. Jason listened the way he listened to everything, not just to what was being said, but to the shape underneath it, the thing the words were built around. Then he opened his notebook and began drawing. By the end of the meeting, Gerald had his answer. He shook Jason's hand at the door and said he would be back. He came back. He brought others. Jason drove home to the studio apartment that first evening, the small 1-bedroom that smelled like new paint and the particular kind of quiet that is not empty but waiting. And he sat at his desk and updated the business plan the way a ship's navigator updates a chart when the weather begins to shift. He thought about what Deborah had said. Good does not pay the mortgage. He turned it over in his mind without bitterness, the way you turn over a piece of information you are not sure yet how to use. He was still not certain whether she had said it to diminish him or because she genuinely believed it. Either way, it had become fuel. He opened his laptop. He answered 3 new inquiries. He updated the project log. Then he turned off the desk lamp and lay down in the apartment that was his and nobody else's, in the life that was still entirely to be determined. He did not dream. He was up again at 5:15. What nobody tells you about building something from the ground up is how unglamorous the actual building is. It is not a montage. It is a Tuesday morning when the liability insurance bill arrives the same week as a client who wants to renegotiate his contract because his investor pulled partial funding. It is a Thursday at 11 at night cross-referencing a load calculation that does not add up, alone in the office with cold coffee and the particular silence of a building after everyone else has gone home. It is Raymond showing up on a Saturday with food when Jason has forgotten to eat because he forgot it was Saturday. It is also, across that first year, quietly, and then less quietly, working. By month 5, Cole Structural Solutions had 6 active clients. By month 8, 12. By the end of the first year, 21, including 2 developers who had come directly from referrals made by Gerald Ames, who had told people. Jason would later learn that the man at Cole Structural had saved his East Corridor project $40,000 in rework costs by catching a load path error 3 weeks before the concrete pour. Word moved the way word moves in professional communities where the stakes are high and the good people are known, steadily, through trust, through the specific credibility of someone who shows up and finds the real problem and does not manufacture a more expensive one. Jason hired Brianna Hayes in October. 26 years old, structural engineering graduate degree, the kind of organized intelligence that had been slightly crushed by 2 years in a large firm where nobody had asked her to actually think. She was visibly nervous on her first morning. Jason showed her the filing system and told her the one rule. Every number gets verified twice. She looked at him. Why twice? Because the first time through you find what you expected, he said. The second time you find what is actually there. She wrote it on a sticky note and put it on her monitor. He saw it and said nothing about it. But he noted it. It was the action of someone who intended to take the work seriously, and that was what he needed in that room. He hired Dwight Barnes in January of the second year. 15 years of field experience, a reputation for locating structural failures in buildings that looked fine on the surface, and a quiet manner that concealed a comprehensive technical mind. Jason offered him a salary 30% above what the competing firm had proposed. Dwight accepted before the sentence was complete. The office expanded. A second room, then a third. By late spring, Jason had moved the company into a proper suite on the 9th floor of the Dearborn building. Conference room, drafting space, an office with a window that looked out over the city the way his father had always talked about wanting an office to look. His father had been a construction foreman who spent 30 years building other people's buildings and used to say that the best view from a building was not the one the architect put on the brochure. It was the one the worker got when he stood at the top on the last day before handover and looked out at the city that did not know he had built something in it. Jason thought about that most mornings when he sat at his desk. The personal side of things moved the way it moves after a serious loss, more slowly, with more caution, and with the particular effort of a person learning to trust their own judgment again after a long period of doubting it. He started seeing Dr. Thomas in April, a therapist on the East Side with the unhurried quality of someone who has heard the real version of most human problems and is not startled by them. In their 4th session, Dr. Thomas asked him not what Deborah had done, but what Jason had accepted as normal that should not have been. Jason sat with the question for a long time. It was not an easy question. The honest answer required him to locate the place where he had started making himself smaller, and that place was uncomfortable to find because once you found it you had to account for the time you spent there. I stopped presenting my thinking to her, he said finally. Not all at once. Gradually. Because every time I did she would find the place it was most uncertain and apply pressure there until I started doubting it myself. He paused. So I stopped telling her what I was building. I edited myself down to what she would find acceptable, and I called it keeping the peace. And what did the peace cost you? Dr. Thomas asked. 2 years of working in secret on my own plan, Jason said. In my own house. Dr. Thomas wrote something. Then he looked up. It also cost you the ability to recognize early enough that a person who requires you to shrink is not a partner, he said. That is worth understanding. Not so that you blame yourself. So that you recognize the pattern next time before it has 2 years to establish itself. Jason drove home from that session and sat in his car outside the apartment for a long time. Not distressed. Something closer to the feeling of a room after a window has been opened. The particular quality of air that was not there before. He went upstairs. He made dinner. He opened the project log. He kept going. It was at a city infrastructure conference in the spring of the second year that Jason Cole met Simone Abra, and the meeting was not romantic in its beginning, which was perhaps why it became what it became. She was presenting on structural risk assessment protocols for municipal infrastructure, and she presented the way people present when they know exactly what they know, from memory, without performance, with the quality of attention that makes a room go still. She was precise without being cold. She was confident without announcing it. She had the manner of someone who had done the hard work of becoming certain about something and no longer needed to argue for the certainty. She said something in the final minutes of her presentation about compressive load distribution in aging bridge decks that intersected directly with a problem Jason had been working on for a client for 3 weeks. Not adjacent to the problem, exactly the problem, approached from a direction he had not considered. He introduced himself in the hallway afterward, not because he had planned to, because the thing she had said was too accurate to walk away from without mentioning it. The modified tributary approach you referenced for the load path analysis, he said. Did you apply it to the full span, or only the affected section? She turned and assessed him with the specific attention of someone deciding whether a question is serious or decorative. The affected section only, she said. Full span application overstated the risk by about 11%. Which would have been useful if the city wanted to justify a more expensive intervention. But I was not modeling for budget justification. I was modeling for what was actually there. He smiled before he could choose not to. They talked in that hallway for 50 minutes. The room emptied behind them, and neither of them noticed. Her name was Simone Abra. She ran infrastructure risk assessment for the city's planning division and had done so for 6 years after leaving a national engineering firm whose culture, she said without bitterness, had been entirely committed to solving problems in ways that generated the most additional problems. She told him this directly, without editorializing, the way she appeared to say everything, as information rather than performance. He told her about Cole Structural. She asked 3 specific technical questions about his methodology that told him she was actually interested, not being polite. He asked if she wanted to continue the conversation over coffee. She said she had a call at 4, but was free before it. They found a place around the corner and stayed until the light outside changed. He drove home afterward and sat in the parking structure outside his building for a long moment, not analyzing the evening, just aware of something having shifted in the specific way that things shift when they matter. He texted Raymond, had coffee with someone after the infrastructure conference. Engineer. City planning. Raymond's response came in 38 seconds. Finally. Call me. He called Cecilia the next morning instead. She listened to everything he said about Simone, the tributary load comment, the coffee, the way she asked questions that demonstrated she had actually been listening. When he finished, Cecilia was quiet for a moment. She sounds like someone who does not need to make herself smaller for anyone, she said. No, Jason agreed. She does not. Good, Cecilia said. You have spent enough time with people who needed you to. They did not move quickly. Neither of them was built for quick, and they recognized that in each other early, which was part of why it worked. Coffee became dinners. Dinners became evenings that extended past the natural ending point of dinners because neither of them was ready to stop the conversation. She came to the office 4 months in, walking through it with the curious attention she brought to structures, asking about load-bearing elements, interested in the actual architecture of the thing rather than the surface presentation. He showed her the project wall, a full whiteboard covered in his handwriting, active clients and timelines and open questions marked in red. You map everything visually, she said. Always. Since I was a student. He handed her a marker without thinking about it. She looked at the board for a moment. Then she walked to one of the project entries, a 6-story mixed-use development in the Eastern Corridor, encircled a notation and wrote 3 words beside it. Geotechnical report missing. He looked at what she had written. He picked up his phone and called the project manager on that site. The geotechnical report was, in fact, missing. It had been submitted to the wrong department and had been sitting in an inbox for 11 days. He caught it 9 days before the foundation pour. She was looking at the window when he finished the call. He watched her and stored the image somewhere in the part of himself he had been learning, across the past 2 years, to listen to. 5 months in, she took him to her parents' home for dinner. Her father, Dr. Kwame Abra, was a retired civil engineer with the particular combination of warmth and rigorous expectation that only men who have spent careers building things seem to develop. He asked Jason technical questions for the first 25 minutes of the evening. Jason answered each one directly, without hedging, which seemed to be the answer Dr. Abra was actually looking for. Not the technical responses specifically, but the quality of directness with which they were delivered. Her mother, Adiz, fed him egusi soup she had been making since that morning and said things about the importance of a man who is not afraid of his own thinking. She said it the way she appeared to say everything, as simple fact, requiring no elaboration. After dinner, when the dishes were being cleared, Adiz looked at Jason across the table. Simone tells me you came through a serious ending before this. I did, Jason said. And what did that teach you? He did not rush the answer. He thought about it the way he thought about structural problems, from the foundation upward. That I had built something with someone who needed the structure to look strong from the outside regardless of what was happening inside it, he said. And that I had spent a long time maintaining the appearance of something instead of asking whether the thing itself was worth maintaining. He paused. I do not intend to repeat that. Adiz looked at him for a moment with the evaluating attention of someone who has spent a lifetime reading the difference between what people say and what they mean. Then she nodded, once, and went back to her soup. Simone caught his eye across the table. She did not smile. She simply looked at him with the direct, open quality she had. The look that said, I see you clearly, and I am not afraid of what I see. He drove them home through streets wet from an evening rain. The city lights laid out across the asphalt in long broken lines of gold and white. Your mother asks honest questions, Jason said. She always has. Simone was quiet for a moment. Did it bother you? No. It was the right question. She turned and looked at him in the passing light. I want you to know something, she said. She said it the way she said everything important, directly, without building toward it. I have not let myself want something like this in a long time. And I am not telling you that to create pressure. I am telling you because I think honesty at the beginning costs less than honesty later, when the stakes are higher. He kept his eyes on the road. I know exactly what you mean, he said. I thought you might, she said. The disagreement came at month 6, and it was not about anything personal. It was about Gerald Ames. Simone had been looking over the quarterly project summary Jason had shared, not because he asked her to, but because she had been sitting at his dining table while he was on a call, and the summary was open on his laptop, and she was constitutionally incapable of looking at financial documentation without reading it. When he got off the call, she looked up from the screen. You are undercharging Gerald Ames by approximately 30%, she said, based on comparable specialist consulting rates for projects of this scope. Gerald has sent me 7 referrals in 8 months. Gerald has also been running 14% over structural cost on the Riverside project since February, and you have flagged it twice, and he has not corrected it, and you are still doing his work. Jason was quiet. I am not telling you how to run your client relationships, she said. She closed the laptop and turned to face him with the even, unhurried manner she used when she was about to say something she had thought through. I am telling you that the way you price yourself teaches people what you are worth. You built something real. Price it like something real. He sat with that. He revised the rate structure the following week. He had the conversation with Gerald Ames on a Thursday afternoon that was uncomfortable for the first 15 minutes, and then became something more honest than the arrangement they had before. Gerald Ames did not leave. He also, within the month, corrected the structural issue on the Riverside project. Jason told Simone over dinner. Of course he did, she said. You do not seem surprised. People respond to being treated like they can do better, she said. Most of the time they can. They just needed someone to stop accepting less. He looked at her across the table. She was cutting her food and not looking at him, which was how Simone said the most important things, without waiting to see if they landed. They always landed. 2 years, 3 months, and 9 days after Deborah Cole handed Jason a coffee mug in a kitchen that was no longer his and told him that good does not pay the mortgage, Jason arrived at the office at 7:45 and made himself coffee in the small kitchen off the main floor and stood at the window looking out at the city the way he did most mornings. Cole Structural Solutions occupied the full 9th floor of the Dearborn building now. 14 employees. 3 active states. A client roster that had grown from Gerald Ames and a whiteboard to a waiting list for new project intakes that ran 6 weeks out. The conference room had the long table and the proper chairs and the whiteboard the full length of one wall that Simone had written soil report missing on 14 months ago, and that Jason had never fully erased because the writing was still there in the lower right corner, and he found that he did not want to erase it. Brianna Hayes ran the analyst team now with the same careful authority she had brought to everything from the beginning, only now with 2 years of knowing what she was doing layered beneath it. Dwight Barnes had brought in 2 former colleagues from his old firm, both of whom were better than what any competing firm had been willing to pay for. The morning had a quality of settled, functioning momentum. Jason was reviewing the preliminary load analysis on a 14-story residential tower in the third ring corridor when Brianna appeared in the doorway. She had an expression on her face that he had learned to read over 2 years of daily proximity. It was not alarm. It was the particular careful blankness of someone who has assessed a situation and made a decision about how much of that assessment to show. "There is a walk-in at reception," she said. "No appointment. She asked specifically for you. Name." A brief pause. Brianna was not a person who paused. "She said you would know her." Jason set down his pen. "Send her back," he said. He heard the footsteps before she appeared. He recognized them, not because he had been thinking about them, but because the body remembers things the mind decides to set down, and 14 months of living beside someone leaves a specific and indelible record. Deborah Cole stood in the doorway of his office. She was dressed the way she always dressed for meetings that mattered. Charcoal blazer, good shoes, hair precise. The surface assembly was correct. It was assembled with obvious intention, which told him something. People who feel secure do not have to intend their presentation. They simply arrive. She was intending this. He looked at her the way he looked at everything that required assessment, from the load-bearing elements inward. She was thinner than he remembered, not unhealthy, carefully maintained. But her eyes carried something that no amount of careful maintenance could address. The specific exhaustion of someone who has been holding something heavy for a long time and is no longer entirely sure they can keep holding it. "Jason," she said. Her voice was level, controlled. She had always been good at controlled. "Deborah." He set down his pen. "Sit down." She sat. She placed her bag on the floor beside the chair with the deliberate care of someone managing each movement consciously. "I saw the posting," she said. "Senior Project Coordinator. I would like to be considered." She slid a resume across the desk, printed on good paper, formatted cleanly. The presentation of someone who understood professional language and was using all of it. Jason picked it up. He read it the way he read all documents, from the beginning, systematically, with attention to what was present and what was absent. Deborah Cole, Director of Development Finance, Meridian Capital Partners. 18 months. The job she had taken 6 months before she filed the divorce papers, with a company whose managing partner, Jason now recalled from a networking event 3 years ago, had looked at Deborah across a room with the specific attention of a man who has already calculated something. Meridian Capital Partners was not listed as her current employer. There was a gap at the bottom of the resume, between her last listed role and the present date. He calculated it without trying, 9 months. He set the resume down. "Walk me through your current situation," he said. His voice was the same tone he used in client intake meetings, neutral, professional, genuinely attending. Something moved in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the tone, or of the fact that the man across the desk was using it. "I have been in an independent consulting capacity since leaving Meridian," she said. "Current clients?" A pause. It was a short pause, but it was there. "I am in the process of formalizing the portfolio." Jason looked at her. He said nothing for a moment. He was an engineer. He knew the difference between a structure under construction and a structure that had not yet been started. The language was similar. The reality beneath it was not. He also knew this language specifically. He had spoken it for 14 months while applying for jobs he did not get. "I am building my options. I am in conversations. I am in the process of formalizing." The language of someone in genuine professional freefall who has not yet found a way to describe the freefall without using it to describe themselves. "Leave the resume," he said. "We have a scheduled candidate for this role and 2 others under review. I will be in touch by the end of the week." Deborah looked at him. Something moved across her expression. Surprise, he thought. Not at the professionalism of the response, at the completeness of it, at the absence of anything beneath it that she could read or use or navigate. She had expected something from him. She had not expected nothing. I would appreciate the consideration, she said. She stood. She picked up her bag. At the door she paused. She put her hand on the frame and looked at the office, the whiteboard, the project wall, the quiet evidence of a company that was genuinely and substantially real. You built something here, she said. She did not look at him when she said it. I can see that. He said nothing. He waited until her footsteps reached the elevator. Until the elevator arrived. Until the doors closed and the hum of the machinery faded. Then he sat in the quiet of his office for exactly the length of time it took to confirm that what he felt was not anger and not satisfaction and not grief. What he felt was clarity. The specific stillness of a man who has arrived at a place he built himself and is no longer confused about how he got there. He picked up his phone. She just walked into my office, he said when Raymond picked up. Raymond was quiet for 2 seconds. Then, as in, what does she look like? Jason looked out his window at the city below, the morning light moving across the rooftops. Like someone who has had a difficult 2 years, he said. And you? Like someone who made better use of them, he said. He did not go looking for information about Deborah out of pain or anger. He went looking the way he went looking for anything. Because the situation warranted it, and because he was constitutionally incapable of making decisions without understanding the full structural picture first. He started that evening at his desk. He found Meridian Capital Partners in the Public Business Registry. He found their annual filings. He found the press release issued 11 months ago, one measured paragraph about strategic portfolio realignment and a commitment to focused investment disciplines going forward. The language of a company that had lost significant money and did not intend to discuss how. He found Derek Ashworth, not through the press release, through a business journal profile published 8 months ago, 3 months after Meridian's restructuring announcement. The profile described Ashworth as a visionary financier undergoing a personal and professional renaissance. It mentioned his engagement, a woman named Camille Fairweather, a private ceremony, a photograph of the two of them at what appeared to be a resort somewhere warm. Jason sat with that for a moment. He thought about the flicker in Deborah's eyes at the divorce signing when he had asked if there was someone else. The answer that was not no. The job at Meridian that had begun 6 months before she filed. The new clothes. The way she had been buying new things for months before she left. Not recklessly, but with the particular purposeful investment of someone preparing a version of themselves for a new context. He was not angry. He had spent 14 months being angry in the early days after the divorce, and then slowly, through the work and Dr. Thomas and the particular discipline of building something real, the anger had converted itself into something more useful. What remained now was not anger. It was the clean, cold understanding of the full shape of what had happened. She had not left because of the 14 months. She had left because of someone. The 14 months had simply given her the language to use when she went. And the someone had moved on. And Meridian Capital Partners had restructured. And she had been looking for work for 9 months. He closed his laptop. He picked up his phone and called Brianna. The senior coordinator role, he said. What is the status on our top candidate? Jerome Whitfield. You said you wanted to make a decision by Friday. Make the offer tomorrow morning. First thing. Done. And the walk-in from today? Send a professional decline. Standard language. Nothing specific. I will send it tonight. Thank you, Brianna. He set the phone down. He sat for a moment in the quiet office, the city outside his window doing what it always did in the evenings, lighting itself floor by floor, building by building, each window its own small insistence on being present. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Her personal number. He set the phone face down on the desk. 45 seconds later it buzzed again, the notification sound of a voicemail being left. He did not listen to the voicemail. He texted Raymond. She called. I did not answer. Raymond. Good. You okay? He thought about the question honestly. He texted back. Better than okay. I know exactly where I am. Simone came over that evening. He had called her that afternoon, on the drive back from a site visit, and told her what had happened the way he told her things, directly, without constructing a version of it first. She had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she had said, Do you want me to come over or do you need the evening alone? He had said, Come over. She arrived at 7 with ingredients for the jerk chicken she made when she wanted to feed someone properly, and she moved through his kitchen with the ease of someone who had been coming to this apartment long enough that it was familiar without being performed. He sat at the counter and watched her cook, and they talked about her day. A presentation she had made to the infrastructure committee about a drainage failure in the Northeast Corridor that had been flagged 18 months ago and ignored until the first significant rain of the season turned it into an emergency. Does it frustrate you? Jason asked, being right before people are ready to hear it. No, she said. She did not look up from what she was doing. Because the record is always there. I documented the flag. The timeline is the timeline. When the failure happened, the record said exactly what it was. She looked up at him. The frustration is not about being right. The frustration is that people had to stand in water before they would listen. He was quiet for a moment. That is the right way to think about more than one situation, he said. She looked at him. She put down what she was holding and came to the counter and stood across from him. How did it feel, she asked, seeing her in your office? He thought about it the way he thought about everything that deserved an honest answer. Like watching someone return to a place they left, he said. Except the place has changed completely, and they have not. And the gap between those two things is, he paused, more clarifying than anything I could have arranged. Simone looked at him. You did not arrange it, she said. No. You just built what was yours to build, she said. And the rest of it arranged itself around that. He looked at her across the counter. She had the particular quality, in moments like this, of someone who understands the real architecture of a situation. Not the surface story, but the load-bearing logic underneath it. Yes, he said. That is exactly what happened. She went back to the chicken. They ate at the table with the windows open to the evening, the city noise coming up from below, and Jason felt something that he had been feeling with increasing frequency over the past several months. The specific, unfamiliar, and completely genuine sensation of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The call came on a Thursday morning, 11 days after Deborah's visit. Jason was in the middle of a site review with Dwight when his cell rang with a number he did not recognize. He let it go to voicemail. 15 minutes later, walking back to the car, he listened to it. The voice was a woman's. Measured, direct, with the quality of someone who had decided to make a call and was not going to waste either person's time once she made it. My name is Vivian Jefferson. I was Deborah Cole's direct supervisor at Meridian Capital Partners for the duration of her time with the firm. I have something you should know. Please call me back at your convenience. Jason sat in the car for a moment. Then he called back. Vivian Jefferson had the voice of a woman in her mid-50s with no patience for indirection and no interest in padding. She said she had seen the announcement about Cole Structural's regional contract win in the business section 2 weeks ago. She had noted Jason's name. She had decided to make this call. I want to be clear about why I am calling, she said. I am not calling out of malice toward your ex-wife. I am calling because I was in a room where certain things were said, and I believe you have a right to know what was said in that room. Tell me, Jason said. At the Meridian annual dinner approximately 18 months ago, Vivian said, Deborah spoke about you to a group of colleagues. I was at the table. She said, a brief pause, the pause of someone choosing words with precision. She said she had left her marriage because she had realized she needed a partner who made her look like the most capable person in the room. Not the most capable woman. The most capable person. Another pause. She said living with an engineer who could find the flaw in any structure, including hers, had become exhausting. She said she needed someone who did not look at her that way. Jason was quiet. I am telling you this, Vivian continued, because I have since watched what happened to her at Meridian. I know what Derek Ashworth represented and what he turned out to be. And I believe that a woman who says those things about a man like you has made a serious error in understanding where her problem actually is. A brief pause. I thought you should know what was said. What you do with it is your business. I appreciate you calling, Jason said. One more thing, Vivian said. Her voice shifted slightly, not warmer, but more deliberate. The house. The deed transferred during the refinancing. I was present in a conversation between Deborah and Derek Ashworth approximately 2 months before you were served with the divorce papers. He advised her on the transfer, specifically on how to structure it, so that your name coming off the deed would appear to be a standard refinancing action rather than an intentional asset separation. She paused. I do not know if that information is useful to you. I suspect you have an attorney who could tell you. Jason looked through his windshield at the building in front of him. A 12-story residential structure, 3 years old, well-maintained. He had reviewed its foundation report 3 months ago for a buyer's due diligence inspection. The building was sound. Thank you, Vivian, he said. I will be in touch. He called Kevin Marsh, his attorney, from the same parking lot. Kevin listened to everything. Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Jason, this changes the nature of the deed transfer question entirely. If the transfer was structured with prior knowledge of impending divorce proceedings, if there was intent to separate assets before you were informed of the decision, that is not administrative. That is potentially actionable. What would that require? The source you described would need to be willing to provide a statement, and we would need to file within the applicable window. A pause. Are you interested in pursuing this? Jason looked at the building. Sound foundation. Load paths correctly distributed. Everything holding the weight it was built to hold. Yes, he said. Get started. That evening he told Simone. She listened with the focused stillness she brought to things that mattered. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. How are you feeling? She asked. Clear, he said. Not angry. Clear. There is a difference, she said. Yes. He looked at her. Someone told me that once. She recognized the reference. She did not smile about it exactly, but something in her expression acknowledged it. What does pursuing it mean practically, she asked. She had moved directly, the way she always moved, to the structural question. Not the emotional one. The one that required an answer. A formal hearing. Documentation of the transfer timeline. Vivian's statement if she is willing to provide it. He paused. Potentially a financial remedy equivalent to the equity I lost when my name came off the deed. And you want to do this? I want the record to say what actually happened, he said. Not because of what it means for Deborah, because the record should be accurate. I have built everything I have on accurate records. I am not willing to have the starting point of that story be inaccurate. Simone looked at him for a long moment. The load path from the foundation to where you are now should be documented correctly, she said. Exactly. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers for a moment. Just a moment. Then she picked up her glass. Then document it correctly, she said. 3 weeks after the decline email went out, Deborah came back. Not by phone. Not by email. She came to the office the way she had come the first time, in person, without warning, and stood at the reception desk and told Keisha she was not there about the position and she would wait however long it took. Keisha called back. Jason was in the middle of reviewing the preliminary engineering report on a 14-story mixed-use tower with 2 of his analysts. He read Keisha's message. He finished the section he was on. He told his team to take 15 minutes. He walked to the small conference room by the elevator bank and opened the door. Deborah was sitting with her hands folded on the table. She had come differently this time. No blazer. A dark blouse, well made but not armored. Her hands were still. Her face, when she looked up, had the particular quality of someone who has spent time preparing to stop performing. He sat across from her. I received the decline, she said. I assumed. I am not here to contest it. She looked at her hands for a moment. Then back at him. I want to talk to you. Then talk. She looked at him. The organized, always 3 steps ahead quality that Jason had lived with for 9 years was not entirely gone, but it was thinner, like a wall that has been weathered. What was behind it was something he had not often seen on Deborah's face. Something that looked like the thing a person's face does when they have stopped managing what it shows. I made a serious mistake, she said. He waited. Not one. A series of them, across a long time, that I told myself different stories about while I was making them. She paused. I told myself I left because I was exhausted. Because I was carrying too much. Because we had grown into people who wanted different things. Another pause. All of that was true in parts. None of it was the whole truth. What was the whole truth? Jason asked. Not harshly. The way he asked questions that mattered. Simply and directly. Because softening the question changes the answer. Deborah was quiet for a moment. I left because someone told me there was a version of my life that looked better than the one I had, she said. And I believed it. And I was willing to, she stopped. Started again. I took things that were ours. I took them intentionally, in advance, and I told myself it was protection, that it was practical, that you would be fine. She looked at him. I do not believe that anymore. I know what it cost you. The room was very quiet. Jason looked at her the way he looked at structural reports that had finally given him a complete picture. Not with emotion about what the picture showed. With the specific, grounded attention of someone who now had the information they needed. I appreciate you saying that, he said. I mean that without reservation. But, she said. No but, he said. What you said is true and it matters, and I am not dismissing it. He rested his hands on the table. I am also not going to tell you that it changes the current situation, because it does not. She looked at him. The position is filled, he said. That would have been true regardless of our history, and regardless of what you have just said. He paused. There is no version of this where you come to work here. Not because of anger. Because it would compromise what I have built, and it would not serve either of us. Something moved across her face. Multiple things, in a sequence she was no longer managing. Is there someone? She asked. He recognized the question. He had asked it once. She had not answered it honestly. Yes, he said. She nodded once. Small. Controlled. Then she asked a question he had not expected. Is she good to you? He looked at her. Yes, he said. She is. Good. Deborah looked at the table for a moment. When she looked back up, her expression had settled into something that was not quite peace, but was the next thing below it. I did not come here expecting anything, Jason. I want you to know that. I came because I needed to say what I said to someone I had said unjust things about without saying them directly. She paused. You deserved better than what I gave you. I know that now. I needed to say it to your face. He looked at her for a moment. Thank you, he said. And he meant it. Not as a kindness. As a true thing. She stood. She picked up her bag. At the door she stopped. You always knew how to read a structure, she said. I should have understood sooner that that included ours. She left. He sat in the conference room for 90 seconds. Long enough to confirm that what he felt was settled. Not satisfied. Not relieved. Settled. The specific and complete stillness of a thing that is no longer unresolved. Then he stood up and walked back down the hall and knocked on the door of the room where his analysts were waiting and went back to the engineering report. The structure they were reviewing had a moment frame issue in the northeast quadrant that would cause problems at year 7 if not corrected now. Jason caught it in the 3rd section. He marked it in red and moved to the next item. The hearing was scheduled for the 2nd Tuesday in October. The State Housing Authority's formal review process was less dramatic than its name suggested. Not a courtroom, not adversarial in any theatrical sense, but a conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown administrative building with a long table, fluorescent light, and a housing compliance officer named Donna Reese who wore steel-framed glasses and had the particular quality of someone who has sat in this room many times and has absolutely no interest in the performed version of events. Jason arrived early. He arrived early to everything. Kevin Marsh sat beside him with 3 folders of documentation arranged in an order they had spent 3 evenings preparing. Vivian Jefferson had provided a written statement and had agreed to appear if required. She sat in a chair along the wall to Jason's left, her posture correct and her expression carrying the particular calm of someone who has decided that honesty is the most efficient policy. Deborah arrived with her attorney 7 minutes before the start time. She looked at Jason when she entered. He looked back. Neither of them nodded. There was nothing in the exchange that required a gesture. They both understood what room they were in and why. Kevin presented the timeline first. The refinancing had taken place 26 months before the divorce filing. Jason's name had come off the deed at that time, on the stated basis of a credit score flag during the loan review. The documentation Jason had signed at the time described the change as an administrative adjustment to the loan structure. It did not describe it as a permanent deed transfer that would eliminate his ownership interest in the property. Kevin presented the closing documents side by side with the loan paperwork. He showed where the language diverged. He showed where what Jason had been told differed from what the documents actually accomplished. He then submitted Vivian's written statement, which described a conversation between Deborah and Derek Ashworth that had taken place approximately 2 months before the divorce filing, in which Ashworth had specifically advised Deborah on structuring the deed to make an intentional asset separation appear to be a standard refinancing action. Donna Reese read the statement. She removed her glasses, cleaned them, replaced them. She looked at Deborah's attorney. Would your client like to respond to the statement from Ms. Jefferson? Deborah's attorney said the statement was unverified and the characterization of the conversation was his client's word against the declarants. Donna Reese said, "That is noted. Is your client willing to state under this proceeding that she was not advised by Derek Ashworth prior to the deed transfer on how to structure the change?" There was a pause on Deborah's side of the table. Jason did not look over. He was looking at the documents in front of him. The pause lasted 4 seconds. Deborah's attorney said his client was invoking her right not to provide testimony that could be used in subsequent proceedings. Donna Reese wrote something on her notepad. She wrote for a long time. When she looked up, she looked at both sides of the table equally. The documentation provided establishes a material discrepancy between what the current respondent understood himself to be signing at the time of the refinancing and what the document actually accomplished in terms of his ownership interest, she said. The statement provided, combined with the respondent's invocation in lieu of denial, provides sufficient basis for this office to refer the matter to the Housing Equity Division for a formal remediation assessment. She folded her hands. The assessment will determine the equity position lost at the time of transfer and the current fair market equivalent. Both parties will be notified of the timeline. She closed her folder. This proceeding is concluded. Kevin shook Jason's hand in the hallway. Jason thanked him and walked to the elevator alone. He wrote it down. He walked outside into the October air, which was the specific quality of October in this city, clean and slightly cold, and carrying the smell of leaves turning somewhere nearby. He did not feel triumphant. He felt the particular relief of a record that has been corrected, the satisfaction of a load path that had been misrepresented finally being documented accurately. The building had always had this structure. Now the structure was on record. He texted Cecilia. The hearing went the way it needed to go. She called in 20 seconds. He could hear from the first syllable that she was going to cry, which meant she had been holding something in preparation for this news, and now she was releasing it. He stood on the sidewalk outside the Housing Authority building and let her cry for a moment. "Mama," he said, "I am okay." "I know you are okay," she said, and her voice was wet and certain. "I am not crying because you are not okay. I am crying because you are." He stood there on the sidewalk for a moment longer after they hung up. The October air moved around him. The city continued its indifferent and enormous operation in every direction. Then he called Simone. "It went the right way," he said. She was quiet for a moment. The specific quality of quiet she had when she was feeling something she was choosing not to rush. "Good," she said. "Come home." He paused at that word. Home. He had not lived with Simone. They had not made that move yet, though it was the next one, and they both knew it was the next one in the way that two careful people know a thing before they say it. She had said come home, and she had meant his apartment, but she had said it with the ease of someone for whom the word was transferable. "I will be there in 40 minutes, he said. "I will be there," she said. He walked to his car. He drove home through October streets. He was glad about that. He was glad about most things. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. The equity remediation came through on a Monday morning in December. Jason read the letter at his desk with his coffee. He read it twice, once to know the number and once to understand it. The equity assessment had calculated the ownership interest lost at the time of the deed transfer, adjusted it for market appreciation over the period, subtracted a credit for mortgage payments made by the sole occupant, and arrived at a figure. It was a specific number. It was not small. He set the letter down. He looked at it for a moment. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a manila folder. He put the letter in the folder. The folder already contained the co-founder documents from Cole Structurals Incorporation, the first signed client contract with Gerald Ames, and a photograph from the office's first morning. One room, second-hand furniture, a whiteboard that was blank because nothing had been built yet. He locked the folder in the bottom drawer of his desk. He pocketed the key. Then he opened his project log and started the day. The African American Builders and Infrastructure Alliance annual recognition dinner was held on a Thursday evening in the second week of December at a hotel downtown with high ceilings and good lighting and the warm, specific noise of a room full of people who had built things and were in the presence of other people who understood what that meant. Cole Structural Solutions had been named Regional Firm of the Year. Jason arrived with Simone. She wore a dress the color of deep water and looked entirely like herself in it, which was the standard he had come to understand mattered most. At the table, Cecilia, in the good blue dress she reserved for occasions worth the good blue dress. Raymond and his wife Naomi. Raymond already scanning the room with the quiet satisfaction he expressed when something he had invested in was being formally recognized. Brianna Hayes, who had said she probably would not come and then arrived 20 minutes early and claimed a seat with clear sight lines to the podium. Dwight Barnes. Kevin Marsh. Three of the junior analysts who had driven together and were still figuring out how to be at a dinner this formal without looking like they were figuring that out. Jason moved through the room before the program started. talking to the people worth talking to, which was a skill he had learned slowly over the past 2 years. The skill of being present in a room where you are being seen without performing the being seen. He had not always had it. He had developed it the way you develop anything that does not come naturally, through practice and the willingness to be awkward on the way to being good at it. Cecilia found him near the edge of the room 20 minutes before the program. She took his hands in hers and looked at him the way she had looked at him his entire life, with the complete and unguarded directness of someone who has no interest in softening a true thing. Your father built 30 years of other people's work, she said. You built your own. He would have found that more impressive than anything else in this room. Jason looked at his mother. I know, he said. I know he would have. She squeezed his hands once. Hard. Then she released them and smoothed his jacket and said, Now go sit down. You look like you are about to pitch someone instead of be recognized. Occupational pattern, he said. Break it for one evening, she said. He went and sat. Simone was beside him. At some point between the appetizer and the first speaker, her hand found his under the table. Not announced, not performed, just present. The way she did everything that mattered. He turned his hand over and held hers. When his name was called, he walked to the podium with the posture he had maintained for 2 years of presenting to clients and investors, and people who needed to believe that the man in front of them had command of the thing he was describing. It was not a performance. It was the physical expression of a man who had decided, at some point in the past 2 years, to stop taking up less space than he occupied. He looked at the room. I want to start with something that is true and not impressive, he said. His voice was clear. He had not rehearsed this. He did not work best from rehearsal. 2 years and 4 months ago, I had $4,215, a car, 7 boxes of books and files, and a business plan in a notebook that no one in my life at that time believed in. The room was very quiet. I had just completed a divorce that cost me a house, a joint account, and 9 years of a life I had built carefully alongside someone who had decided, also carefully and in advance, that she was finished with it. He paused. He was not looking at notes because there were no notes. I am not telling you that for sympathy. I am telling you because the shape of where something starts matters to understanding what it means when it arrives somewhere. He looked at the table. Cecilia had both hands folded in front of her and was looking at him with the expression he had known since he was 5 years old. The one that was not pride exactly, but was the thing that contains pride and also grief and also something fiercer than either. Raymond had his arms crossed over his chest the way Raymond crossed his arms when he was feeling something that he intended to feel privately. Naomi had her hand on Raymond's arm. Brianna was holding a pen she was not writing with. Simone was looking at him with the open, unmanaged quality she had. The specific expression of someone who is watching something they understand the full value of and are not pretending to understand it less. I am an engineer, Jason said. I have spent my professional life looking at structures, at what is load-bearing and what is decorative, at what holds weight and what only appears to, at where the failure will come from if the thing is not built correctly. He paused. When my life came apart, I applied the same lens. I found the load-bearing elements. My mother, my best friend, the work, and I built from there. Another pause. Not to prove something to someone who had doubted me, because building was what I knew how to do, and the foundation, it turned out, was still there. He looked at the room. The room looked back. There were a few hundred people in it, and they were all entirely still. Cole Structural Solutions is what happens when a man with a notebook and a specific kind of stubbornness finds the people who will build alongside him. He held the room's attention for one more moment. I intend to keep building. Thank you. The applause came up immediately. The real kind. Not polite, not performed, but the specific sound a room makes when something true has been said in it, and the room recognizes it. He walked back to the table. Cecilia reached over and put her hand on his forearm and left it there for a moment without speaking. Raymond unfolded his arms and nodded once. That single nod contained everything Raymond had never needed to say directly, and both of them knew it. Simone leaned toward him. That was exactly right, she said quietly. Was it? He said. The foundation still being there, she said. That is the part that matters. Not the rebuilding. The fact that there was something real underneath it to rebuild from. She paused. You knew that the whole time, even when you could not feel it. He turned and looked at her. The room was moving around them, applause settling into conversation, the evening resuming its ordinary progress. She was looking at him with the direct, unguarded quality she had. The look that said, I see the actual structure of you, and I am not afraid of the load it carries. I want to ask you something, he said. I know, she said. He paused. I have not asked it yet, he said. I know that too, she said. You have been organizing the approach for about 3 weeks. He looked at her. I am an engineer, he said. You do not rush load-bearing decisions, she said. I know. She looked at him with the smile that was not a performance, the one that changed the whole quality of her face. Ask when you are ready. I am not going anywhere. He picked up his water glass. She picked up hers. They touched the rims together the way you do when the moment does not need to be made larger than it is. The dinner went on around them. The city went on outside the windows. Everything moved. 6 days later, Vivian Jefferson sent Jason a message. 1 paragraph. Thought you should know. I heard through a contact that Deborah has relocated. She is working for a small financial services firm in another city. A junior role. She did not announce it. Someone who knows someone told me. I am not sure why I am telling you except that I thought you might want the information to be complete. Take care of yourself, Jason. You earn what you built. Jason read the message at his desk on a Tuesday morning. He read it once. He noted the information the way he noted all information, assessed it, filed it, understood its place in the record. He thought about what Vivian had said on the phone 11 weeks ago, about the dinner at Meridian, about what Deborah had said she needed, a partner who made her look like the most capable person in the room, who did not look at her the way Jason looked at things, who did not find the flaw in every structure. He sat with that for a moment. He had spent a long time, in the months after the divorce, turning that over, asking himself whether there was something in him that was too much. Whether the way he moved through the world, methodical, searching, unwilling to accept what did not add up, had made him impossible to live beside. Whether she had identified something real about him when she identified it as the problem. He had answered that question, slowly and honestly. Across 2 years of therapy and work and the particular instruction of Simone Abra, who had handed him a marker in his own office and written soil report missing on his whiteboard without being asked and been right about it. The way he looked at things was not the problem. The way he looked at things was the thing. It was the foundation. It was what everything else was built on. She had not been able to live with it because she had not wanted to be seen clearly. That was not his failure. That was his nature meeting someone who required something different. The two things were not the same, and he had spent too long believing they were. He set his phone down. He opened his project log. He had 7 active project reviews. A new client intake at 11. A developer from the South Corridor who had been referred by Gerald Ames, who was still a client, who had long since corrected the Riverside project issue and had in fact told Jason recently that it was the most useful correction a consultant had ever made him make. A call with Raymond at 3 about the Columbus expansion, which they had been preparing for 6 months and which was now 6 weeks from being real. He had, on his desk in a small frame that Simone had brought over on a Sunday without particular ceremony, a photograph of the two of them at her parents' table, her father in the middle of explaining something that required hand gestures, her mother visible at the edge of the frame doing something practical and paying no attention to the camera. Simone looking directly at the lens with the expression that was not quite a smile, but contained everything a smile contains and more. He had, in the bottom drawer of his desk, the folder with the first contract and the first morning photograph and the equity remediation letter and the incorporation documents and every document that had marked the actual structure of the past 2 years. He had the work in front of him. He started. That evening, Simone came over after her infrastructure committee meeting ended at 7. She came in the way she came in now. Key in the lock, coat on the hook, shoes off at the door, the particular ease of someone moving through a space that has been shared long enough to have a physical memory of her in it. She found him at his desk reviewing a preliminary report on a concrete core issue in a residential build. She looked over his shoulder at the schematic. Your moment frame is carrying load it should not be carrying, she said. I know. I just found it. Section 4, she said. The transfer beam. I was about to get there. You were there, she said. She went to the kitchen and started making tea without being asked. He marked the transfer beam. He noted the correction. He set the report aside for the morning and closed the laptop and went to the kitchen. She handed him his mug. They stood at the counter the way they stood at counters, side by side, easy, the city going on below the window in the way it always went on. I want to ask you something, he said. She turned and looked at him. She knew. He could see that she knew, the way she always knew things a moment before he said them. Okay, she said. He set his mug down. He reached into the pocket of his jacket, which was hanging on the back of the kitchen chair the way his jacket always hung on the back of the kitchen chair. He held what he had taken from the pocket. Simone looked at it. Then she looked at him. Her expression was the open, unmanaged one. The one she had when she was feeling something and was not performing it. I have been thinking about load-bearing decisions, he said. I know, she said. This is the most important one I have made. I know that too, she said. Quietly. Simone Abra, he said. I would like to build the rest of this with you. She looked at him for a long moment. The city moved outside the window. The tea was going warm on the counter. Everything was still in the specific way things go still when the moment inside them is large. Yes, she said. Just that. Clean and complete and exactly right. He put the ring on her finger. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. It is well designed, she said. He laughed. She laughed. They stood in the kitchen of the apartment that was his and would now be theirs, in the city that had done what cities do throughout all of it. Indifferent, enormous, continuing regardless, and held on to each other in the uncomplicated way of two people who had each, separately, learned the cost of building on a weak foundation and had chosen this time to build on something that would hold. 3 weeks after the dinner, Jason's phone lit up on his desk while he was finishing the transfer beam correction report. A text, a number he had not saved but still recognized. Congratulations on the award. Saw the write-up in the journal. I am glad you are well. I mean that. He read it once. He sat with it for 30 seconds. Then he set the phone face down on his desk, turned back to the report, and finished the section he was on. Outside his window, the city was doing what it always did in December. Lit and cold and full. Every building illuminated floor by floor. Each window its own small insistence on being present in the dark. Jason Cole looked at the transfer beam notation on the report in front of him. He corrected it. He moved to the next item. He had always known how to find the flaw and correct it. He had always known how to read a structure and understand what it was actually built to carry. He had applied that knowledge to every building he had ever reviewed, to the company he had built from a notebook and $4,000. To the understanding of a marriage that had required him to see clearly what he had been living inside, to the choice of a woman who looked at structures the same way he did and was not afraid of what she found. He had built correctly this time. The foundation would hold. That was, in the end, the only thing that had ever mattered.